What kind of worthless junk did you give me? Frank Lawson held my gift between two fingers like I'd handed him garbage. 30 people were packed into our ranch house for his 55th birthday, and suddenly, every conversation stopped. I bought it myself, I said. I thought you'd like. This, he lifted the handmade leather watch strap so everyone could see the engraved Lawson Ranch initials. Look at what everyone else brought me, Rita, and you embarrass me with this. Someone near the dining table looked away. My face burned. I had spent weeks saving for that gift. I just wanted you to be proud of me. Frank's hand struck my cheek. My mother, Elaine, froze beside the birthday cake. Nobody moved. Frank pointed toward the stairs. Get out of my sight. That night, I climbed through my bedroom window and ran away. Hours later, a black sedan found me on an empty highway. And the man waiting inside was about to destroy everything Frank had taught me to believe. I was still a teenager then, and for most of my life, Frank had made one thing painfully clear. Everything under that roof belonged to him. The house, the cattle, the land, even my future seemed to belong to him. At family gatherings, relatives talked about how Lawson Ranch would remain with real Lawson blood someday. I would stand nearby carrying plates or cleaning up after everyone, pretending those words didn't sting. So for Frank's birthday, I had wanted to prove I could give him something meaningful without asking him for money. Instead, he slapped me in front of everyone. Upstairs, I shoved clothes into a backpack with shaking hands. I emptied the cash from a tin beneath my bed, climbed through my window, and dropped into the grass. I didn't say goodbye. I walked until the ranch lights disappeared behind me. By nightfall, my feet hurt and the highway had become a black ribbon stretching between empty fields. Then headlights appeared. A black sedan slowed beside me. I moved farther onto the shoulder. The car slowed too. My stomach tightened. I started running. Doors opened behind me. Wait. I ran harder, but two men caught up. Before I understood what was happening, they pushed me into the back seat. Let me go, I screamed, grabbing the door handle. Help, somebody help me. Stop the car. The command came from an older man sitting across from me. The sedan stopped immediately. Unlock the doors, he ordered. Click. I stared at him, breathing hard. You can leave if you want, he said quietly, but please hear one sentence first. His eyes studied my face with an expression I couldn't understand. Then he said the words that changed my life. Hello, dear. My name is Daniel Mercer. He swallowed. I'm your biological father. You're lying. I shoved the door open, but Daniel didn't reach for me. Call the police if you want, he said. What those men did was wrong. They panicked when you ran. He handed me his phone. That stopped me. A kidnapper didn't usually unlock the door and offer his victim the police. Why were you looking for me? For years, Rita. My fingers tightened around the phone. You don't know me. Your mother's maiden name is Elaine Mercer. I stared at him. You were born at St. Catherine's Hospital, he continued, and beneath your left shoulder you have a small heart-shaped birthmark. My hand instinctively moved toward my shoulder. Daniel reached into his coat slowly. Don't. It's only a photograph. He placed it on the seat between us. My mother looked 20 years younger, visibly pregnant, standing beside Daniel with his arm around her. I picked it up. That could mean anything. It could, he said, which is why I'm not asking you to believe me tonight. Daniel explained that he and Mom had separated before I was born. She later married Frank. I wrote to you, he said. I sent money, birthday cards, Christmas letters. I never got anything. His jaw tightened. Eventually, I started receiving messages saying you wanted nothing to do with me. I remembered being 8 years old and asking Frank why I didn't look like the Lawson cousins. He had slammed his fork onto the table. Stop asking stupid questions. At the time, I thought I'd insulted him. Now I wasn't sure. Daniel took me to a nearby motel and arranged for a female attorney he trusted to meet us. He didn't demand that I stay with him or call him Dad. Before the attorney arrived, I called Mom. She answered immediately. Rita, where are you? I'm safe. Oh, thank God. I'm with someone named Daniel Mercer. Silence. Not confusion. Silence. Mom. Her breathing changed. What did he tell you? My stomach dropped. You know him. Then Frank's voice exploded somewhere behind her. Elaine. There was a rustle, as if he'd grabbed for the phone. Ask her what he showed her. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear. Daniel watched me without saying a word. Frank hadn't asked who Daniel Mercer was. He hadn't asked why I was with a stranger. He wanted to know what Daniel had shown me. And for the first time in my life, I wondered whether Frank's anger had never been about controlling a difficult daughter. Maybe he had been terrified I would discover something. But if Daniel Mercer was supposedly nobody to our family, why had Frank been afraid of him all along? The DNA results removed the first lie. Daniel Mercer was my biological father. But I didn't suddenly call him Dad and pretend we had recovered all the missing years. I left Frank's house permanently, finished school, built my own career, and allowed Daniel into my life slowly. By 35, I thought Frank belonged to a chapter I had already closed. Then Daniel's attorney called. Rita, we found something in the property records. Daniel had purchased 640 acres beside the original Lawson property while he and Mom were still together. After Mom married Frank, those acres gradually became part of what everyone simply called Lawson Ranch. But the ownership records didn't match. There were conflicting transfers, conflicting signatures, and Frank had recently used the combined acreage as collateral for a major expansion loan. Daniel's attorney sent formal letters requesting that Frank correct the ownership issue. Frank ignored everyone. So when we learned he would attend a county agricultural association meeting, Daniel and I went there. Frank was laughing with ranchers and lenders when he saw us. His smile vanished. You've got nerve coming here. Daniel remained calm. You had opportunities to handle this privately. Frank looked at me. So this is what you became, helping some rich stranger steal your family's ranch. He isn't a stranger. Frank laughed loudly enough for nearby conversations to stop. I didn't argue. I opened my folder and placed certified property records on the table. Frank glanced down. Then his face changed. His eyes had landed on Daniel's original deed number. He snatched the documents. Stop digging up dead history, Rita. A lender representative, standing nearby, stepped closer. Frank, he said carefully, was this acreage included in the collateral description for your expansion loan? Frank said nothing. Frank. He shoved the papers back toward me. This is nobody's business. It became our business when you pledged the land, the lender replied. Several ranchers were watching now. Frank pushed through them and stormed toward the exit. For the first time, he hadn't been able to silence me by raising his voice. And everyone in that room had seen why. The next morning, a process server drove through the gates of Lawson Ranch. He walked to Frank's front door carrying an envelope. Inside was formal notice that Daniel Mercer had filed a civil property and fraud claim against him. Frank didn't wait for the lawsuit to expose him. He attacked first. He told anyone willing to listen that Daniel had abandoned the land decades earlier and returned only because Lawson Ranch had become valuable. Then he turned his anger toward me. You're helping a stranger steal your own family's ranch, he told me. But once the court process opened Frank's records, accusations stopped being enough. Daniel's attorneys found old bank documents showing he had continued paying property taxes on portions of the 640 acres. Then came copies of correspondence. Letters to Mom. Letters addressed to me. Returned envelopes. I picked up one and stared at the handwriting across the front. I know that writing. Daniel looked at me. Whose is it? Frank. Then the attorneys examined the document Frank claimed had transferred Daniel's remaining ownership rights. The signature didn't match Daniel's verified signatures from the same period. Suddenly, pieces of my childhood connected. Frank exploding whenever I asked why I looked different. Mom panicking when I mentioned Daniel. The filing cabinets Frank kept locked. And the sentence he repeated whenever I questioned anything about Lawson Ranch. You own nothing here. The court temporarily froze further transfers involving the disputed acreage. Then Frank's lender began reviewing the expansion loan. His control was shrinking. One evening, Mom called me privately. Rita, I need to tell you something. I said nothing. Frank knew Daniel never signed away all of his rights. I closed my eyes. And the letters. Another silence. Frank intercepted some of them. He was afraid Daniel would come back. Then testify. I don't know if I can. If you stay silent again, Mom, you're choosing him again. Days later, she agreed. At the decisive hearing, I sat behind Daniel while Frank entered the courtroom, insisting the ranch belonged to him. The judge began reading through the property records, correspondence, handwriting analysis, and loan documents. Frank's face drained. Then he suddenly stood. Your Honor, if you make that ruling, I lose everything. The courtroom went silent. The judge lifted his eyes. Sit down, Mr. Lawson. Frank remained frozen. The judge's voice hardened. That is precisely why ownership matters. The judge didn't rule from emotion. He ruled from records. By the time the hearing reached its final stage, the story Frank had protected for decades had been reconstructed document by document. Before I was born, Daniel and Mom had been together. During that relationship, Daniel purchased the 640-acre tract adjoining what would later become Lawson Ranch. He intended that land to be part of their family's future. Their relationship ended before my birth. Mom later married Frank. Over the years, Frank began using Daniel's acreage as though it were simply another part of his ranch. But Daniel had never signed a valid transfer, surrendering all his ownership rights. And Frank knew it. Instead of resolving the defective title, he continued operating across the acreage. Eventually, when he wanted financing to expand his ranching business, he represented the combined property as land he controlled. Then Mom took the stand. Frank stared at her. Mom could barely look back. Did Mr. Lawson know Daniel Mercer was attempting to contact Rita? The attorney asked. Yes. Did he interfere with those attempts? Her fingers tightened around the edge of the witness stand. Yes. Frank leaned toward his attorney. Mom continued. He said keeping Daniel away was best for the family. The courtroom became completely still. That sentence answered the question I had carried since the night I ran away. Daniel hadn't abandoned me. He had written. He had sent money. He had tried to find me. Frank had helped make sure I believed otherwise, because Daniel's return threatened two things Frank valued deeply: his control over me and his control over the land. I looked at Frank. For a moment, his expression reminded me of that birthday party. He looked at me as though he expected me to lower my eyes, to become the frightened girl who apologized whenever he became angry. I didn't. Daniel quietly reached back and squeezed my hand. Then the judge delivered his ruling. Daniel retained ownership rights in the disputed acreage. Frank had no authority to pledge the entire tract as though its ownership were uncontested. That ruling triggered consequences far beyond 640 acres. Frank's lender reassessed the expansion loan. Damages and legal costs mounted. Creditors moved against the assets Frank actually owned. Without the financing structure he had built around the combined property, Frank couldn't keep the operation together. The ranch had to be dismantled through a court-supervised sale. Cattle were sold. Equipment was sold. Then the remaining ranch property Frank legitimately owned was sold to satisfy his obligations. The man who had spent decades reminding everyone that Lawson Ranch was his kingdom watched it disappear piece by piece. And the community finally learned why. Frank had told people I returned because I wanted money. The court record showed something very different: concealed ownership problems, intercepted correspondence, and years of decisions designed to protect his control. Mom eventually separated from him. She admitted that her silence had allowed the deception to continue far longer than it should have. I didn't suddenly become wealthy because Daniel was my biological father. The court restored Daniel's legitimate property rights. Later, he made his estate plans openly and legally, ensuring there could never be another generation built around secrets. More importantly, Frank no longer controlled anything about my future. Daniel and I kept rebuilding our relationship slowly. We couldn't recover the birthdays, school years, or ordinary moments we had lost. So we stopped trying to manufacture a perfect father-daughter history and concentrated on creating an honest one. Part of the recovered acreage remained with Daniel. We preserved it instead of trying to rebuild another ranch empire on top of Frank's ruins. And I kept one strange reminder of the night everything began. The leather watch strap. The same gift Frank had held in front of 30 people and called worthless. I didn't keep it because I missed him. I kept it because when I looked at it, I remembered the teenage girl who spent weeks saving money because she believed one perfect gift might finally make her father proud. She didn't know that Frank already knew she wasn't his biological daughter. She didn't know how many letters had been kept from her. She didn't know that beneath the ranch, where she worked for his approval, was land connected to the father who had actually been searching for her. Most of all, she didn't know that Frank's cruelty had never measured her value. It had measured how badly he needed her to remain powerless. Frank once slapped me for giving him something he called worthless. Years later, a judge took away the ranch he valued above everyone, and I walked out of that courtroom knowing my worth had never belonged to him.